This is like the whole grab bag of everything I talk about on this program and have talked about on this program and other platforms for the last nearly 30 years. Just give us before we dive right in here, give us kind of a brief biographical sketch rather of yourself, just in terms of not necessarily the events that we're going to get into, but just maybe kind of your resume, if you could.
Okay. It was kind of a thing I was born into in a very strange way. Um, I was adopted at birth. It was a very unusual set of circumstances around that adoption. It was a big reason why I wrote the book in the first place was beginning at the beginning and carrying it through my entire career to more or less present day. Um, I was sold at birth to an enigmatic oil driller and his wife. They couldn't have children. So through my life with that family, traveling around the world, very strange circumstances, strange people, and being in the 1970s, things were more open. It was less social media. Um, so these societies, these little cultures, they operated really without any cover. They didn't need to have that cover. So for me, it was a environment I grew up in, you know, starting at a very young age. And about 4.5 was when, well, possibly two, because my memories are very scattered from that period. But at 4.5 is the first vivid memory of my first abduction experience. And my adopted father was there watching it. It was like the whole thing was arranged. And it was like from that point on, my whole life just took a completely different course. It seemed serendipitous, seemed random, like these random things would come into my life. But the older I got, I started to see that they weren't random at all. They were starting to fit together into a pattern.
All right, already
Uh,
there's a lot to unpack here. So were you as a baby, you were sold to this? Did they live in Alaska, if I'm remembering correctly?
they were working in
Ah,
Alaska. My mother, my biological mother, she was from Texas. But being 1969, she was married. You know, I was the product of an affair she had.
okay.
Um, and that was really where the story starts was with the man who is my biological father. Um, because my mother, she was a bartender who became head manager of this little private club in what was called the Bayou in Houston. And back then, Houston was called Baghdad on the Bayou because that was Operation Mongoose. All the intelligence agencies from all around the world were in Houston. It was a big hotbed, anti-Castro, anti-socialist, anti-communist, the whole, you know, Lee Harvey Oswald, all that was happening in that area. And what she had, I found my birth mother in my 30s, like way, way later. So the book jumps back kind of in time, starting with a secondhand story I got from the horse's mouth, right?
Right, right.
How I came
And
into
your
the world.
and your biological father, what did you learn about him?
That she was working at this club called Sir Walter's, right? I haven't found any trace of it or evidence of where it was, just its name. Um, there was a head bartender there named Clarence, and one night this black Lincoln with these six gentlemen showed up, and Clarence ordered everybody out of the building, like just get up, leave. You know, don't finish your drinks, don't say a word, just get up, get out. And these guys walked in, and my mother, who was the bartender, it was her job to serve them. And she said there was six of them. They all wore matching black suits. They all spoke with British or Australian accents. She can't. She doesn't know the difference between British and Australian. And they didn't refer to each other by name, just by numbers. Well, Clarence, the head bartender, he didn't like this arrangement, so he up and quit. And my mother got promoted from bartender to manager. Well, she struck up an affair with one of these guys. They would come back regularly, right? And she struck up an affair with one of these gentlemen, and I was the product of that affair. So when she had no choice other than to tell her husband that she was pregnant, she couldn't hide it anymore. She left to Alaska to live with her sister And that's when she put an ad in the paper offering me up for sale for 10 grand. And the gentleman, the oil driller, Jay, purchased me for $10,000 plus medical expenses plus travel back to Texas. That was the deal. So he prepaid, and when the day came for me, to come into the world, that's when he was supposed to take possession. Interesting connection between all that really made me wonder about that situation was that Jay worked for a company called Schlumberger Tools. And Schlumberger was one of the big CIA fronts operating in the Houston Bayou at that time when I was conceived. So we go from the Houston Bayou to Alaska that connects right back to Houston.
Right. Jay is your adopted father.
He's adopted my adopted father.
All right. Was he
And
good to you? Did he treat you well?
but no, he treated me like basically worse than the family pet, kind of like a dog that you bought and then change your mind, you don't want it but can't get rid of it. Um, so my whole childhood, I went like, why did you adopt me? I knew it was no secret. It's like, yeah, like
Were there siblings?
really,
Did you have step brothers, sisters?
I eventually had two sisters about 7.5 years in, so about 7.5. But the day Jay took possession of me, um, we left the country, never came back. We went to Malta. And from there, we went to all these places, which were normal to me as a kid. Like, you don't know the geopolitical things as a kid, right?
Right.
You're just being dragged around with your parents. But we lived in Malta, we lived in Russia, we lived in Iran, we lived in Dubai, we lived in um, Jeddah. I mean, we lived all over the Middle East. Spent a year and a half, approximately a year and a half, um, living at the Sultan's Palace in Brunei.
Hmm.
Um, my father just dropped me off there. He went to work. He didn't come back for a year and a half. So I was just left in care at this Sultan's Palace in Sultan of Brunei. Um,
What kind
not
of
like it
education were you getting?
was a private education. There were other kids there. I don't recall ever meeting the Sultan or being a part of his household. I mean, a palace is a big household. Like
Mhm.
there's lots of people, there's servants, there's the children of servants, right? Um, so I was just kind of raised there, went to, sort of a school, like a daycare during the day. I was, under 6. I wasn't like school kid age. This is probably between 3 and 4, ages 3 and 4.
So, your abduction at the age of 5, where were you living at the time of the abduction?
We were living in Scotland. Jay had come back, got me from the Sultan's Palace, and he'd gotten a flat in the old part of Aberdeen in Scotland. And we were living there, and it was one of those, you know, quintessential old British flats. You open up the front door, there's the stairs, you go in, you go upstairs, and there's the residence, right? And one night I'm woken up, and Jay is calling to me from outside of my room, from down the hallway, and he's screaming, yelling, "Get out here, boy! Get out here!" So I wake up and I go across my bedroom, open the door, step out into the hallway, and I look up to my left, and there's my dad looking down at me. And just instinctively, I look to my right, and there's these little gray alien. I didn't know they were aliens. I didn't know what they were. Right? Later reflecting on it, I thought they were like fairies or elves. Something out of like the mythology that I was exposed to at that age. Right? Fairies, trolls, that kind of thing. These three things in the hallway, and behind them, where the stairs should have gone down to the front door, like should have been the hallway, and you go down the stairs. The stairs weren't there. That whole part of reality was now like a corridor, like a white corridor hallway. Reminded me today of like a hospital hallway, how it's all white. And there was what looked like chairs in little groups down both sides of the hallway. But at the beginning of the hallway was still our hallway. Right? It's a very surreal scene to try and describe, especially if you're not a writer, like, um, So I turned back to my dad. I was going to run, you know, to my dad for protection. And right as I leaned forward to run, I got caught by the shoulders and I slipped that, dove onto the floor. So now I'm face down on the floor trying to crawl away. And they catch me by my ankles and start dragging me backwards. And I just remember screaming and yelling. And I grabbed a hold of a little table where the telephone was in the hallway. Back then the phone was in the hall. And I grabbed a hold of that little table and they're dragging me, I'm dragging the table, and we're all screaming as we're going down this hallway. And they're not saying a word. And I remember looking up from the floor, face down on the floor. I looked up and I could see my dad. I could see Jay just watching this happen. And I didn't know any swear words, but if I would have, it would have been what the F, like
Right.
that was the feeling I had. It was really, like, really, dude, like you're letting this happen.
Yeah. No, the ultimate betrayal. What about your
Yeah.
adoptive mother? Was she in the room present?
Oh, no, this was after they split up.
Wow.
Like, you know, we moved around the world, ended up in Norway. Jay and his first wife, Betty, they split up. He took me, dumped me in Brunei, came back and got me, and we went to Scotland. That's when that happened.
Um,
Uh,
and then there are other, well, do you have any, was this a conscious memory? What happened at 5, or was this through regression or what?
no, it's a conscious memory, one I never lost. It was like the first real solid memory. You know how the further you go back, the hazier the memories get. I remember roughly 2 years old. We were in Norway, so I had to have been 1.5 to 2 years old. I remember looking up and seeing a light in the sky. And then the next thing I remember is I'm looking at the kitchen door. I'm inside the house looking at the door going outside. Right. I was outside. Now I'm inside. As I see that light, now I'm inside and my first adopted mother's yelling at me. She's like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, I didn't have an answer. I'm just getting screamed at. Um, so apparently just that little memory was, I saw that light in the sky. I was gone for a while and she's freaking out. And that's all I remember about that. Um, but that one at 4.5, one, it was right before I would meet my new mother coming up, right? Because Jay's about to get married in the story. So it's just a few months before that. We're in a new country and I'm actually being drug off. But the big thing that sealed it in my head was looking at him, watching this happen, and the next day thinking about it, like, what was that? Why me? You get this whole surreal, why me? Did it even happen? And then I know he was watching, but it was never acknowledged again. You know, the next day looking at him, I'm like, and there's almost no recollection on his face that last night even happened, or what I'm
Yeah.
getting at? Like,
Yeah. Where did they take you, these grays? Did they take you into an examination room? Was there an examination or some
it
sort?
was it was an examination. You're what I thought was like a hospital, like a doctor's office. You know how the doctor's office has that weird chair with the butcher paper on it?
Hmm.
It was kind of like that, but it's not, it didn't look like that. The room had that whole doctor's office feel, but it was very stark, very plain. Everything looked like it was extruded, like molded into one piece, right? Rather than separate components.
Right.
Um, and they had me kind of leaning back, right? And with my mouth open, and they went out through the roof of my mouth, and I could smell like a burning in my nose and pressure going up and a crunch, crunch, as it broke through the tissue levels.
Mhm.
Well, first, before they did that, I asked them, I said, "Are you going to hurt me?" Because I'm laying there and they're looking down at me. And I said, "Are you going to hurt me?" And they, voice in my head said, "Yes." And that was when I went completely calm. I remember thinking, at least they're honest. Like, I'm not getting lied to. I don't know why I thought that. I guess I just felt like, maybe even at that age, I felt like everybody was a liar. Like,
Right.
you know, there's no truth in my life, about any of what's been going on. Even as a kid, you may not know that that's what it is, but you know that something's just not, truthful about a situation. So with them, when I ask a direct question, are you going to hurt me? And they're like, matter of factly, yes. Like, okay.
And did it?
Oh, it hurt. It hurt like hell, especially it went into the top of my head with a second needle. So they're up and then they're in the top of my head. Um, and it hurt. I thought my eye was going to pop out. I still have a problem with my left eye with vision. It just felt like my eyes would pop right out of their sockets.
What do you think
Um,
what do you think they were doing? An implant? Were they putting an implant in, or what do you think was that procedure all about?
they were looking for what I learned later was they were looking for DNA profiles. That's what they're really after. It was the only time they ever did that to me. They didn't do any other weird kind of tests. It was just, one in the mouth, one in the head. When they pull it out, the one on the left looked down over me. And while he was looking at me, the pain just went away. So I felt a gratitude and a kind of a connection with them right in that moment was not only did they not lie about what they were about to do. Yes, yes, we're going to hurt you. But when they were done hurting me, they took the pain away. And so I also felt a gratitude for that. Like at least you cared enough to, you know, not leave me hurting.